Welcome to Deal Talk. My name is Jeffrey Veit, and we're going to talk about motorcycles, boats, and motorhomes and buying them. We cover some of the automotive news as well, and we try to have an electric vehicle corner every week because of the push by the Biden administration to get Americans investing in this unsafe, expensive, ridiculous transportation mode. I want to make sure that everybody gets as much as they can from me about it, the facts, and then you can make your own decision on what you want to do. But I want you to have the real facts, not the baloney that goes on, as far as the news, the fake news. But in lieu of the new executive orders by the regime, let's talk about that EV battery. The battery is something that doesn't get talked about much, and it really has a lot to do with electric vehicle, probably the most to do with it. Most people don't realize that the typical electric vehicle battery requires 25 pounds of lithium. This is just one battery. 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese, 30 pounds of cobalt, and 200 pounds of copper, and 400 pounds of support materials like aluminum and steel and plastic. Every vehicle battery. Think about that. To put all that together, all that mining and plastic manufacturing requires fossil fuel to dig it up. First of all, diesel vehicles to move it around, and backhoes and all those kinds of things are all fossil fuel. We're moving 500,000 pounds of Earth's crust for every single battery. Yep. And you should know about that. None of those products are, indicative of the U.S., those special metals. Another odd fact, though, is that electric vehicles, they talk about it being powered by the battery. The battery is just a container for the real fuel. It's got nothing to do with powering it. The battery just holds the fuel, electricity. If you were to say that the battery runs the vehicle, it'd be like saying that the cans of gas come in and run the vehicle. They don't. It's the gas that runs it. It's the electricity. Gas cans and batteries are just containers for the real fuel. Electricity is produced primarily by coal and uranium and natural gas diesel generators. 40% of the EV power used to charge batteries is produced by coal-burning plants. They actually are more counter what they're trying to do with these batteries than what fossil fuel is. Electric vehicles actually do more to hurt the environment. The U.S. uses 3 billion batteries a year. Most end up in landfills, where the metalist byproducts leak out into Mother Nature. The metals mentioned earlier are in limited supply already. When you look at the world's top 10 countries for the production of all these metals, the U.S. is number 10 on one category. Yes, one. I believe it's nickel. It's 10th. It's not even in the top 10 on any of the rest. And as we commit more to EVs, where will the metals come from? Think about that. Are they just going to fall out of a tree? Who will be able to buy one? Are this going to put us in a position where only the elites, the really wealthy, which are good people and they've got to drive, so they're the only ones who can afford it? That's not their fault. It's because we allowed this regime, this Green New Deal, to put us in that situation, not based on science. There is no science. They'll say things like 97% of scientists say, which scientists? What's their names? They never have any of that. No, it's not the case at all. More importantly, this won't do a thing for global warming. CO2 is not the problem in global warming. It has nothing to do with it. We have 3 trillion trees on this planet to handle 75 billion tons of CO2, 75 billion tons of CO2, right? The trees on this planet, never mind all the other green stuff, grass and flowers and, all these different things and bushes, just the trees could handle twice as much, almost 3 times as much as CO2 as we produce on this planet. It could process it, because that's what happens to it, right? They process it, the plants take in the CO2, and they produce oxygen. Yeah, we could actually handle almost 3 times as much. That's not counting all the other foliage. Yet they keep talking about it. Did you ever wonder why? Why would somebody keep stressing a point they know is not true? Well, if they know it isn't true, they're all, that's the actual, when you talk to a real scientist, that's a, environmental scientist, and they say, well, one that studies the chemicals and the atmosphere, and like they have at MIT and a bunch of other universities, and I've talked about the guys' names on here before. They say it's not true, that CO2 is not a problem for the planet. Why would someone keep stressing it? I don't know. That's odd, isn't it? But that's what batteries are all about. One more note. What about all the rebates? That's another one I heard in the news this week. They were talking about it. The rebate should get tax credit for buying one. I mean, we all take $7,500 off the sticker in our minds of an EV, because of that tax credit. Where in the case, most people aren't going to be able to use the tax credit. I mean, even if you could use the whole $7,500, they'd still be $10,000 more than the fossil fuel equivalent. It's a tax credit. Most tax-paying people it doesn't apply for them. They might take some small portion of it, but they, maybe $1,000 or $1,500 of a big deal. That's got nothing to do with being $20,000 overpriced. They just can't use it, most people. There are some state credits, but they're based on certain locations, and they don't work any differently. Actual rebates are seldom and a lot smaller. Like I think that Tesla had one of their models that they did a $2,000 rebate. But, it's a $60,000 or $70,000 vehicle. I was in a Toyota store today getting an oil change, and I walked around the showroom, and I looked at this little white and black car called a BRX, or I think it's BRX it's called. It was $55,000. It was about the size of smaller than a Toyota Corolla, because it was electric. And all the other reasons we go through as to why you shouldn't buy electric. You listen to some of the other podcasts. I'll be bringing up portions of this every week to talk about it, but there's 25 or 30 reasons you shouldn't buy an electric vehicle. Good ones, not phony ones where it's maybe, shoulda, oughta. No, these are facts. Then the ones I just went over with you. In the batteries that they're producing, and they get all that ore together and build them, a lot of cases that ore is being mined by children in Africa for sure. Barehanded. And we're driving around. We should have a picture of those kids on the dash of every vehicle, so people in an electric vehicle can see the people that died trying to get their ore out to children. It'd be different, and you think I'm being facetious. Well, maybe, but you know what? It makes me mad that we're doing this because it's not going to help. Ruining our economy is not going to help one lick. It'll help control the population. I mean, that's what the Green New Deal may want. That's what the Third New World Order wants, is to be able to control you. And if you don't have a car that can control you, or if you've got a car where they can limit how far you can drive, they want to use all this money to build stations to charge with all over the U.S. Well, that's part of the reason that we don't have any. That's why we have inflation. They're trying to spend money we don't have. It's one thing to make a change. It's another thing to do it overnight. Electric vehicles should be in the market on their own, and they should stand up on their own. It shouldn't be something where they're favored by the government, because they're not going to change global warming. If there is global warming, and there is some to some degree, it's cyclical with the planet. It's mostly caused by the planet's axis, and it's Mother Nature, and there's not much you can do about it. All you can do is prepare for it and adjust to it, but you're not going to change it. The U.S. being on and having no CO2 would make any dent in the CO2 level. And if the whole world went to electric vehicles, it would make hardly any difference in the CO2 level. It might change the CO2 by enough to lower the temperature of the planet by 0.5%, and there's no benefit to that. I mean, more people die on this planet of cold than they do of heat. And it's like, oh, there's a drought in this area. Yeah, there's a drought there, and then that water's someplace else, because this planet has, other than what's come in on a comet when they crashed into the planet millions of years ago, the same water is on this planet that was on it 3 million years ago. It's the same water. It just moves around. It's not going to make any difference any more or any less, and we just have to adjust to it. That's what we have to do. But I'm here to talk about vehicles, so that's what we're doing here. And another thing we didn't talk about was the resale value and depreciation from having an electric vehicle that's made to wear out in 4 or 5 years. They tell you, oh, it'll last 10 years. No, it won't. So far, it's proven they won't. I mean, they last that long if they don't burn up. A lot of them are burning up. You read it on the news every day. But anyway, enough in the EV corner here. We'll cover it a little bit every week. If you like the podcast, please take a couple of minutes and do a review on iTunes or Google Play. If you like it, I appreciate it. If you got something negative to say it. I don't see how, but if you do, you do. If you already done a review, thank you very much. Don't forget to tell your friends and relatives about the podcast. You'll save them money, and you'll be a hero in their eyes, and that's always a good thing, right, for the family or friends. If you'd like some written material to carry with you when you're out shopping, if you don't, you can't remember everything we talked about on a podcast, which you shouldn't, because I don't, and I'm doing the podcast. And get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon Kindle or Barnes & Noble Nook. Download it to your smartphone or your tablet or whatever. It'll give you the basics for quick reference to remind you and stir your thinking to ask a particular question so you don't make a mistake. And those mistakes can be expensive, right? You might ask one question, it might save you $500 that you remembered from the booklet. And best of all, it's $3. It's been $3 for the last, 7 or 8 years. No inflation on my book. It's $3. That's what it is. $3. Think about it. How can you go wrong for $3? It really doesn't matter whether you're buying an electric, gas, sedan, truck, or new or used, or any buying situation. Resale value is a big, if not the biggest, consideration. I personally think it's the biggest one because it represent 20% of the price. At least 10% in many cases, but 20% in a lot of cases. In fact, almost any major purchase you need to think about resale value. You should think about that when you buy a house. If you're looking at selling a vehicle at some point, you're looking to get a new one in 4 years, think about what you're going to get for it at that point. You pay $30,000 for it, there's a big difference between getting, let's say, $18,000 trade-in and $22,000 trade-in, $4,000, or 18 and 14, whatever it is, $4,000 is a lot of dough. Resale value is the single biggest cost to an owner other than theft. If it's stolen and you didn't have insurance, that would cost you more. The cost per year of ownership, once you add the maintenance to it, that gives you the real picture, resale value and the maintenance. Will tell you exactly what the vehicle costs you to own it. The difference between what you paid and what you sell it for is the true ownership cost. Adding the maintenance to that, like I said, of course. So that's why we talk about it, and that's why we're talking about it today. That's why it came up during electric vehicles, because they're going to have, and any expert you listen to will tell you, they're not going to have good resale value because they're too different from model to model, and stores aren't going to know whether they can work on them or not, and nobody wants to buy something. We've been taught over time that as batteries get old, they wear out. Our smartphones remind us of that all the time. And a battery on an electric vehicle, they'll say, well, they're warranted. Yeah, they're prorated. So instead of $15,000 for the battery, it costs you $12,000 for the battery. It's still crazy money. It's still way, way more than you want to get on. You can't actually touch and see resale value, but it can be your friend or your enemy, one or the other. In fact, you'll notice that Carfax, you see the Carfax ads on television now is offering price based on the damage report. They're telling you what you should pay for a vehicle and how much damage it has. I don't think as a business they're savvy enough to really accurately tell you how much a vehicle is worth. I don't care what they tell you. I'm sorry, they're not in the industry enough to know that. Right there on the street. You want to know what your vehicle's worth? Drive around to 3 or 4 used car dealers and ask them what they'll pay. That's what your vehicle's worth wholesale. Yeah, I don't care what books say. I do care. That's important. It's a guide, but it's not as accurate as what people will actually pay you. But that just goes to show you that they're pointing out in their ads that damage and things that have happened to the vehicle have a big effect on what it's worth. And it does. Now, they may be not right on their pricing, but they're probably very correct on the fact that it's changed the value of the vehicle. Many of things affect resale. If a company has a big sales drop or a poor quality issue, they'll play a part and often affect the entire model lineup. You've heard of vehicles that have had problems over time. Jeep, for instance. Jeep has never recovered in terms of resale value because they aren't, in my opinion, they aren't very good vehicles to begin with. But even if you said they were, they still hasn't recovered the resale value because when you think about it, if you look at a Jeep, it's not very attractive. It doesn't have a ton of room. It's not very comfortable to ride in. It's noisy. I don't know why people buy them. I really don't. They buy a four-wheel drive to drive around Florida. Think about that. I got to get if I get in the sand on the beach, yeah, you buy this vehicle because you might go on the beach once or twice in your life. It doesn't make any sense And the places where you can drive on the beach, guess what? The beach is so matted down you couldn't get stuck anyway. The resale value percentages can vary between comparable vehicles as much as 25% would be on the top side 4 or 5 years down the road. And 10% would be very common. For two models to be 10% different in resale value and be the same original price. But they can be as much as 25%. And there's a few examples of higher, too, as a matter of fact. But you might think that you're making a fantastic deal. It might look, in reality, that like you are because you went and got one model. You're looking at two vehicles about the same price, and one you got $3,000 off, and the other one you only got $1,000 off, so you're thinking you got a way better deal. In reality, you might be making a much worse deal. I'll give you an example. Let's say you had two vehicles approximately the same amount, and let's say they were $30,000. One has a 5-year value of 40%, and the other has a 5-year value of 25%. That means the depreciation on one was $18,000. You cost that person $18,000 plus the maintenance to drive it for that 5-year period. But on the other one, it cost them $22,500 plus the maintenance to drive it for that 5-year period. That's a $4,500 difference. Let's say they negotiated an extra $2,000 off on the one that's the $4,500 difference. There's still $2,500 worse deal because they didn't think about the important one, resale value. You think, wow, what a great deal. I got $2,000 off. No, you didn't. You know what I mean? Just because you get a big discount, distressed merchandise, that's the things that get big discounts. That's where you see vehicles with a big rebate because they're distressed. That's why they do the rebate. They don't do the rebate to make you happy. They do the rebate because they're not selling. The seemingly lower priced vehicle with a lower resale value actually costs more than the one that was a higher price, and they were holding out for the money because it was better quality or whatever the reason might be. Chances are, if it's got a 40% resale value at the end, there's a reason for that. It probably has better in terms of breakdowns and everything else. There was probably, if you were to dissect that sale, I'll guarantee that the 5-year 40% value vehicle ended up costing less in repairs than the one that depreciated much more because resale value is a product of reputation. And if a vehicle breaks down more often, it has not very good resale value. It's completely out of your control that you had a higher cost in the long run. You don't have anything to say about it. The only chance you have to rectify the situation is when you buy the vehicle. You can't do anything about the resale value later on. $1,000 or $2 lower price wasn't enough on that purchase we talked about, right? It's not enough. You got to take a look at a bigger part of the picture. There are a lot of things that make resale value good and a lot that make it bad. The first thing that affects resale value is probably a given. The condition of the vehicle at the time you want to trade it in. So if you've taken care of it and it's not all beat up and it ain't got a bunch of dents in it, you know what I mean, and it's got average mileage on it, that'll help the resale value. Whereas if all that stuff isn't taken care of right, well, it's not. There's other things too. Smokers will buy a vehicle that's smoked in, but a non-smoker usually won't. You think, well, they'll get the smell out. No, you can't. I've been in that business for a long time. You can get it out for a few days. They'll put some Stay Puft fabric softener in the ashtray and under the seat, and then it'll be gone for about a day, and then it'll be back. If the person's been a smoker, you need to know that. Because if you're not a smoker and you can't stand that smell, you don't want that vehicle, and that hurts the resale value. These people who are smoking didn't even think about it. They don't care. They were just driving, and that's it. Well, you want to dance, you got to pay the fiddler. That's the way it is. And a lot of times, when the condition is bad, when you're looking at the condition of a vehicle, it gives even if it's just because it's got some dings and dents and chips, it gives the person an impression that maybe it wasn't cared for in other ways, that you didn't service it right, you didn't do other things. It's kind of like, it's that first impression thing, right? If your seats are ripped and there's a broken taillight and an unrepaired dent, most people think that the vehicle probably wasn't cared for in other ways, like needed maintenance, and maybe the owner's driving habits weren't the greatest. What should you do? Fix them up before selling or trading it? The cost of fixing your trade up probably costs you less dollars than what will be detected if you don't, and maybe a lot less. You should, unless it's, something that was paid for by your insurance. But if there's something, that you get your insurance to do the work. But if you got a small dent and you can got a dent wizard in town and carpets need cleaning and things like that and clean under the hood and stuff, the time you pay someone or you do yourself to fix those things and make it look better when you go to trade it in, you'll get back in 2 or 3 fold. you'll make money on the deal. People don't do it. They just take the easy way. But, that's part of the resale. You want to get the resale up. And that can affect the resale by more than the cost of the repair. In fact, it always does, because dealers aren't any different than people. They're people that work in the business. They're still people. And they're affected by the looks of a vehicle and how it seems. And if you got a vehicle that's beat up and not taken care of, they're not so hungry to get it. You got a vehicle that's been taken care of, they're hungry to get it because they're looking at 2 profits, not 1. And that's the way they think about it. And that's how it affects you. A lot of times I tell people, hey, anything that affects the appearance, you should take care of. Scratches in the paint or small ones, even some of the big ones if you can. Small parking lot dings. The cosmetic appearance is important. Professional detail before you trade it's a good idea. If you're going to get a good detailer, they can mask a lot of issues. And you get it detailed about a week before you're going to trade it. You don't want to detail it before you trade it because the dealer can tell that's what you did. You detailed it. That's what he's going to do to it. You detail it, drive it around for a week, and then take it in. You'll think, oh, man, you took care of this vehicle, right? And because you're looking to get the most you can out of it, right? A complete repaint to the vehicle can be a condition problem, too. It makes people wonder, why was it painted? Not so much on a car that's 9 or 10 years old, but if you're in a vehicle that's anywhere from 1 to 6 years old, it hurts the resale value. Vehicles are usually repainted for a reason. And usually it's damage or hard use. Occasionally they're repainted because of things like sleet, things like that, hail damage. If it's a simple reason for the paint work, have a copy of the repair order. Bring that with you when you go to trade it. To help you get better resale. And it could add to the value. Major damage repair is another big one, right? It's traceable using Carfax now or AutoCheck usually. Their reports are starting to suggest the price difference, right? But more importantly, they do tell you what's wrong with the vehicle. And I don't think that there's a dealer out there that doesn't take that in consideration. It's harder to, when you take a vehicle in trade that's had been smacked hard, let's say in the front end, people are going to ask about that too. The public knows about Carfax or AutoCheck, and they're going to have to tell them. And that just makes it that much harder to sell. And they might end up having to sell it for less than they normally would, one like that. There goes your resale value. That's why Carfax is so important. The only thing that's not a lot of times on a Carfax would be a flood. A Carfax can put a vehicle almost out in left field for value. It really can. In many episodes, I recommend never buying a used vehicle without seeing the Carfax or the AutoCheck. Never. And if it has major former damage, I tell you, just don't buy it. Got frame damage, it's had framework, it'll tell you on the order, don't even buy it for any price. Nope. Because they're never right. I don't care what anybody tells you. I've been in business a long time. Framework is never right, exactly. Something always happens. It either goes out of alignment quick or it wears out tires faster. Some things just don't change, right? You just can't fix them a lot of times the way they were when they came from the factory. If you're receiving an insurance check for repairs, you might want to bring up resale value, right? It might be better if the insurance company got you a different vehicle now rather than keeping the one you have. But if you're going to have to keep the one you have and you've had to repaint it and it wasn't painted, I don't care if your vehicle is 5 or 6 years old, bring up that because that does affect the resale value on every vehicle. And they should pay for that. If it's not your fault, the other insurance company should pay for that. And I talked to you a few weeks ago, I told you about my friend that has a motorhome that got a $5,000 check based on the value of the fact it had been painted. And all they painted on this, it was an expensive motorhome though, but all they painted was the bumper and the rear the bumper and the rear door. You got to discuss it with the insurance company. It's a valid concern. A couple of episodes back, like I said, I talked about it, and what I mentioned then was you might have to push. But push. It's your money. Don't just take their word for it. No, you want money for that. And there are books for that now and adjustments. They have a chart. Most big insurance companies have a way of figuring that out now. Another big one for resale value is mileage. Obvious effect on resale. Probably the biggest in terms of resale value would be the mileage. One reason is because people think that it determines the lifespan of a vehicle is the mileage, right? The books that establish car values in many cases use mileage as a big adjustment factor. Rightfully so. 12,000 miles a year is considered average. 10,000 miles a year is considered low mileage. Anything above 15,000 miles a year is considered high mileage. And of course, vehicles can have extreme low or extremely high mileage, and the value adjustment for the exorbitant mileage amounts should probably be more than the books reflect. They're on a curving scale, and that's why you got to watch out for the resale value. You may not get what the book says you should get if you've got a high mileage vehicle. But if you're driving a vehicle a lot of miles, you should plan on that costing you some money or put some money away to make up for it, because it's really beating the vehicle up in terms of, a lot of people that use their own cars for like Uber and stuff. I don't think they realize that they're paying a lot of money out in terms of depreciation to drive that vehicle around to make the bucks they make as an Uber driver. I wouldn't do that, not in a million years. Not that the work isn't honorable. No, it's the fact that I have to use my own vehicle. High mileage really rams the value, so take into consideration when financing. If you finance 72 months, for instance, and you drive 20,000 miles a year, when your car's paid for, it's going to have 140,000 miles on it. You're going to be upside down almost the whole time you own it. Maybe a shorter finance term would keep up with the depreciation better. So maybe if you finance that one, going to drive 20,000 a year, you could cut that finance back to 60 months or 54 months, and it'd be closer to what you owe in case something happens. You had to, buy a new vehicle. Another consideration is an almost new vehicle. It might work out better for high mileage drivers. Take a look at the numbers. None of these affect the percentage value indicated in the market value guides or the reality of the starting number for that journal line of that make. But those items we just covered all deduct from the market, aka book number, higher or lower, so the final resale figure is comparably more or less the same on a used vehicle. But the nice thing about buying a 1 or 2 year old is you get rid of that first chunk of depreciation, the dealer fee, and all those things that don't add to the value. That first owner's what takes those hits. You don't get any of those hits. You buy it with 1 or 2 years old. You get rid of a lot of that so that things that affect resale value won't be such a huge dollar amount if you're buying a 1 or 2 year old. Market changes hurt resale value too. Things like they stop making the model you own. Most years there are 10 or 20 models discontinued. In 2021, there was 25 different well-known models. And I think there was 26 in 2022, and I forget how many it was this year. There was another chunk of vehicles that are discontinued because they changed a different body style. Not that there's something wrong with them, they just changed the body style and they changed the model and go on to something new. Big names as well as Honda, Mercedes, Toyota, Ford, they all do that. And the highest resale value brands will suffer a small hit for the model disappearing off the charts, and in the less capable models will have a bigger hit. But whenever a model changes and that model isn't made anymore, that hurts the resale value. People don't want something that's over the hill, you might think. It really has an effect. Boy, it really knocks a Mercedes. I worked for Mercedes for quite a while, as you know, and boy, it beats the hell out of a Mercedes. When they change the model year, that's why they only change them every 5 or 6 years. When they change the model, it takes a whack, that last year's model. It's not your fault, but it hurts the resale in most cases, especially for a similar model when the body styling changes, like I said. So I remember years ago when they went from the E series, E300, they changed them quite a bit in the early 90s, and that took a real whack on the vehicle because of that. People just didn't want them unless they got a better price on them. And they don't discount their vehicles, so what they do is just make the new one more. That way they don't have to look like distressed merchandise. These resale issues are big contributors to being upside down, right? I mean, if you have a vehicle that you financed for 6 years and you want to trade it in 3 years, if it's only going to be worth 60% of what you paid for it or 50%, that means the difference between what you owe and what it's worth is bigger than if it had a high resale value and maybe it was worth 65%, you'd owe a lot less. The difference between what you got on trade and what you owed would be closer. And that's what happens a lot of times when people want to trade sooner than their loan runs out is they're upside down. They can't. One of my kids was buying a house lately, and the house they were buying, the people owed more on it than it was worth, and they couldn't get a loan for the difference. So, it was either my daughter would have to pay $30,000 more for the house or not get it. So she moved on to another house. But the point is, That same thing happens in cars, trucks, motorcycles. If you owe more than they're worth, you can't, a lot of times you can't even trade. You owe so much that it's more than the retail value, you can't trade no matter what. Whereas if you had a high resale value vehicle, the chances of being able to trade would be much greater, being upside down. They're just going to be closer together on the vehicle, the resale value with a good resale value. In fact, it could be the difference between being able to trade or not being able to trade. Then you have magazines that pick the best resale value models, right? I checked many of the lists from magazines. There are also opinions in Auto Bytel and Street.com and Kelley Blue Book and CNET and Forbes and Edmunds. They all list the 10 best and a couple offer the 10 worst. All the lists are different with the exception of the old standard high resale value vehicles that a monkey would be able to point out, right? Like a Corvette or an F-150 or a Silverado. Those have good resale value every year and nothing changes there. But other than that, only a couple cars other than the old ones appear on the same, on other companies' lists. Everybody has a different list, right? In fact, I have actually seen vehicles on the 10 worst list that were on another company's 10 best list. Because it absolutely has to do with getting, paid for what they're listing out. That's true. Only if they're going to be accurate with their list, a company, you can usually trust the 10 worst. Because nobody's going to pay to get on the 10 worst list, so there's probably a true list they came up with. Because they have no axe to grind, where if they're coming up with the 10 best, they might be getting paid by a company to put them on that list. And that's why those lists are so much different. They're just getting paid. The ad sponsors make that much difference. But if they get anything right, like I said, it's the 10 worst. But if you want to look at a magazine that does a good job with it, if you get the yearly evaluation edition of Consumer Report, it probably is the best place to look. Hands down. I'm not saying they're flawless. No. I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. But if you get the yearly edition, it's pretty doggone accurate. And the monthlies can be accurate, too. You have one guy that really has got it in his head that Kia is good and that electric vehicles are good, and can't talk to him. The maintenance is lower in electric vehicles. It's not even remotely close. Not even electric vehicles. He says, well, yeah, but you don't have plugs and you don't have to do oil changes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know. But electric vehicles weigh 1,000 pounds more. You think that makes a difference on how the shocks hold up and the brakes and things like that? And the tires? Yeah, I think it does. I think that they'll end up in the long run, when they start getting the data in for a long period of time, they will have cost more in terms of maintenance, actually. And when you figure in the cost of a battery 40 years down the road, it wouldn't even be remotely close. But what can you do to take care of a vehicle to protect the resale value? There are a few things. How about when you buy it? What things hold better value, generally better at the end of ownership? Options you choose are big in those effects. Things like, automatic transmission is important, right? Trucks, having the full-size box instead of a short box. Those things add to the resale value. And I'm not saying you can't buy one without that, but if you want to add to the resale value, it's whatever appeals to the largest number of people. Supply and demand. Even performance vehicles like Corvette are more sellable with automatic transmission. You say better gas mileage? Not so much anymore. Gas mileage comes up, but it's not as big a factor. It's been up for the last couple of years. When we finally punt this regime, gas will go back down. It's just a thing. It's a political thing. They're trying to push the Green New Deal, so they push the price of gas up, and they try to limit the number of, gas vehicles that are sold, or make more vehicles sold that are electric, and they're going to try to force that. And every time the government's gotten involved, after World War II, they got involved in what sold and prices, and they just destroyed the market. And they're trying to do that again. And as soon as somebody with a brain gets into office, someone with common sense, then they'll get rid of that rule. And you'll still be able to buy an electric vehicle if you believe in it and you think it's a good thing and you have your own beliefs. That's fine. And you'll be able to buy one and pay the extra money. But it shouldn't change the person that wants to buy a gas one from buying a gas vehicle. Shouldn't be pushed in the corner on that because they're a lot less money and the general public can't afford electric. Luxury vehicles that aren't loaded take a hit too. So if you're going to buy a luxury vehicle, get everything on it, right? People that buy expensive plush vehicles want everything. They don't want anything to be missing. And so you don't take a chance, just buy it with everything. Not so much on the average vehicle with fancy stereo and GPS because everyone's got a phone, so GPS isn't important like it used to be. And You can plug your Apple phone into your car now. And in snow country, all-wheel drive and 4x4 add to the resale value, obviously, but they also cost more. But the nice thing about it is 4x4 in the Northeast, for what you pay extra to buy a 4x4, you probably get that back in trade-in. It really probably doesn't cost you anything in the long run. Those are the things you can think about it when you're buying a new vehicle. What makes sense? What's going to have the best resale when they go to trade it? Try to stick to that if you can. That's all. Do what you can. If you're dead set against something, well, don't do that, but go look at the other stuff. If you can buy an extra seat, like a lot of vans now, travel, wagons, you can buy an extra seating for it. For $300-400, buy the extra seating. I would. Because when you go to sell it, having more seats does not stop anybody from buying it. Having fewer seats or not enough can stop a lot of people from not buying it. So always have the extra seat. 4 doors always outsell 2 doors in a sedan. Always. Automatic transmission versus stick, like I talked about. Those are all those things I'm talking about are common sense that you think about it, buy that stuff, and you'll have better resale value. Is it measurable? I don't know that it's measurable, but a 4-door versus a 2-door in a sedan, you're probably talking, could be a difference of 5%, because a lot of people that buy sedans don't want 2 doors, because that means the person on the driver's side has to get out to let somebody in, or on the passenger side in the back. So that's one of the inconveniences. And it's not as safe if you're having an accident because there's not other doors to escape, and there's all those things. Here's one you might not realize that can make a big difference in resale value, especially on luxury vehicles. Color. Color hugely affects luxury vehicles. Many times buyers from other countries at the auctions buying luxury vehicles, Mercedes-Benz and BMWs, they'll only buy a black, white, or silver, period. They won't buy a red one or a blue one or a gold one. They might buy it, but chances are those buyers, the import buyers, won't. Local buyers will buy them, but they'll pay less for them because, let's face it, they just don't sell as well. And because they don't sell as well, they don't buy them. So if you buy a brand new Mercedes and it's red, 4-door sedan, I'm telling you it's going to cost you a couple grand when you go to trade it. The fact that you bought red. There's nothing you can do about it. That's just the market. Some dealers say, oh, no, it's not costing you anything. Baloney, I've done this my whole life. That it absolutely will. In the South, a sedan in white's always a little more desirable. Look around in the car lots. You'll see that most of the new car lots, they don't have any white cars because they sold them all. That's why they don't have any white cars. That's what happened. The ones that sit in the lot are the dark ones. And you can't just buy white. You have to have them all. And it can affect the trade value. You're going to trade a Honda Accord, 4-door Accord EXL, let's say. Nice Honda Accord, 4 years old, good shape. You're going to trade it. You're probably talking about for a white one versus black, $500. Same condition, same equipment, everything the same except color, because the white one's just more desirable to the Honda dealer or the Ford dealer, whoever's got it, because there'll be people trying to buy that vehicle out looking for it every day. And that has an effect. Performance, that doesn't help unless it's a sporty model. In that case, people will pay a premium for the biggest, most powerful powertrain, and a lot less when it's missing. So if you're going to buy a Corvette, buy the big motor. If you buy another hot rod, buy the big motor, because they'll always have a Camaro, buy the big motor. That's what people are going to look for. This year, low new vehicle inventory levels because of the chip issue originally, and now it's just a market issue, supposedly. Made used vehicles a bit stronger, especially 1, 2, and 3-year-old vehicles. The reason the manufacturer is shutting down lease trading at competitive franchises is so that they get those trades in. They're kind of forcing the public that leased a vehicle to trade the vehicle back or give the vehicle back to them. They're literally stealing from the public. That's what goes on. There's nothing you can do about it. That's how it is, Inventories are still bad. I was in a Toyota dealer today. I told you I was in there today, and I looked at that vehicle. But I went around and looked around their lot. They didn't have a lot of inventory. This is a pretty big-sized Toyota dealer. This is a pretty good-sized store. And it's big enough to do, what did they tell me, 400 service customers a day. That's a big dealership. And their inventory was small. I was looking for a pickup to see what they had in pickups, what they call extended cab, not the 4-door, the 2-door with the extended cab. Didn't have any. None. Motorcycles are the same. In the imported motorcycles, the performance models hold their value better, like Suzuki. Generally, has a better resale than most of the vehicles because they're the most performant. Harley Davidson is probably one of the best resale value percentages of any vehicle in the world. Just the name has power. Nobody carves Ford into their arm, right? or nobody carves Chevrolet into their arm. And you see Harley all over everything, right? When I worked for Harley, man, you take a $20,000 Harley, it was worth 4 years, it was worth 16. Take a $12,000 Honda, cost $8,000 less. 4 years later, it was worth $6,000. It cost you $4,000 to ride the Harley. It was more expensive to start with. It looked like it was spending more, but it weren't. It cost you $4,000. It cost you $6,000 to own that Honda. Didn't have the supply. You know, it's old supply and demand, and nobody wanted that Honda. Not that many people. It's not the same. It's not the same culture. What about electric vehicles? I think the answer is obvious. I've talked about it at the beginning of the show. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. With all the issues, there are at least 30 big issues with an electric vehicle, along with limited serviceability. Resale will definitely be bad on electric vehicles and could amount to a huge numbers since they cost so much more to begin with. So a $70,000 electric vehicle, I don't care what kind it is. I don't care if it's Honda or Toyota. A $70,000 electric Toyota 4 years from now is going to be worth maybe $20,000. Yep, I think it's going to hurt them that bad. I think the cost of ownership is going to be dramatic. I mean, the battery is so expensive, and the life term is so short, and even to buy one of the lower price TVs, let's say $60,000, you're talking about costing you $45,000 to own it for 4 or 5 years. That's crazy. And that's after your trade. You might get 25% 4 or 5 years from now on a $60,000 electric. Think about it. Would you pay? You want to buy a vehicle that needs a battery? How do you know it doesn't need a battery? Every other used thing does. My iPhone needed a battery after I think it was about 18 months I had to have a battery. Now, you can drive it around with 20% less, even if it only does 300 miles, 20% less. Now I'm in a vehicle that only gets 240 miles. Think about those things. It doesn't make any sense. And it can still catch fire and still, weigh more and still harder to stop. And there's a million reasons. That brings up another big point in resale. The brand of a vehicle can add to the resale percentages across the entire line. If you own a Ford truck, it makes the resale value is good on any Ford truck. Some are better than others. F-150 Lariat might have a resale value of, let's say, after 4 years, 50%, and the other Ford trucks might be at 46%. It might slightly more, but it's still going to be good. Honda and Toyota, Lexus, Acura, Mercedes-Benz, they're all going to have good resale value just because of the brand. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be every model in that brand is going to be top resale value, but it'll still be good. Even their worst vehicle is going to be as good a resale as the other average makes. So you can't really get hurt if you look for brand. I talk about that a lot in quality, in terms of resale value, in terms of how often they need to be repaired. All those things taken in consideration, if you stick to brand, you're much better off. What about the products available with proposed protection to help you protect your resale value? What things make sense? There are some that add to the resale value because they protect the long-term appearance. And you know about first impressions. That's everything. If you live in the Northeast, if I swore on my children's heads that I wasn't going to drive in the snow, I'd still get it rust-proofed. Because when you go to sell it in the Northeast, it adds to the value. Plus, it makes it quieter to drive. But paint sealant. If I couldn't get a good deal from the dealer, I'd do it myself. I did on my vehicle. Scotch guard for the seats. It always makes sense. It's just going to make the seats look better when you go to sell it. Those aren't accessories. Those are investment things. Things you do to protect your investment. Gravel guards behind the rear tires to protect the stones from chipping them. If you live on gravel and stuff, it's a good idea. You might be able to drive around the city without gravel guards, sure, but if you're going to live on a dirt road or driving on dirt roads, you need gravel guards to protect your vehicle. They help maintain the resale value. But, the question comes up, is the cost versus the support to the resale value worth it? Well, usually. You might have to not buy it from the dealer, but, if you can buy paint sealant from the dealer for $150, I'd buy it from the dealer and have them put it on and stuff. If they want more than that for it, I wouldn't. I do it myself. You can buy the paint sealing kit for $25 and do it yourself. Rust proofing, I just buy rust proofing. I'd shop in town before I went to the dealer to see what the prices were, but if I lived in the Northeast and maybe the Midwest, yeah, probably in the Midwest, anything above the Mason-Dixon line, probably, I would buy rust proofing. Because it's not just a benefit of rust proofing that you can tell somebody it's rust proof, it's not going to rust, it'll hold up longer, and when it's 4 years down the road and it's older, people are concerned with that it's going to hold up. But also, it's much quieter. That makes the vehicle a lot quieter when it's rust. It's like putting a whole coating. You don't get as much road noise. It has a dual benefit. But resale value is something that everybody should consider all the time. It's key to any vehicle. I don't care what it is. And many products, it's key to many products. Now, the vehicles you're going to keep to their dead, resale value might not matter. It's not going to matter in your refrigerator, probably, or your washing machine. But all the other stuff, yeah, it does. When you go by, think about resale value. It can mean thousands of dollars to you. Nothing will affect your pocketbook more than bad resale value. Well, that's Deal Talk for this week. If you have a question, a request, or even a comment, please call or email me. Callers, it's 407-801-4071. That's 407-801-4071. Or you can email me at dealtalkpodcast@gmail.com or dealtalk@mail.com. 2 email addresses. Please don't forget to do a review and do yourself a favor by getting a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon or Nook. Get a copy. It's $3. Just think about it. How could you not? Like I mentioned before, tell your friends and relatives. They'll save big and they'll thank you. They're not going to thank me. They're going to thank you for helping them out. And you can do that same thing and let them use your Informed Buyer when they go shopping. However I can help you, contact me and you'll hear from me. And remember, every payment you get should be CPI, complete payment information. The amount, the months, the rate, any required down payment to get to those terms. Every time they quote you a payment, you get those terms. And if you're going to do your own financing, every time the dealer gives you a price, don't listen to one of those, 20,000 plus fees or plus a few things or tax and fees. No, you want a price that includes the tax and the tag and the dealer fee and any options that are required, every single cost to buy the vehicle. You want the OTD out the door.